Sun had yet to rise when Brian boarded the train, unaware of the adventure that awaited him. He sat opposite a young boy about his age, Luke Hartley. Luke was restless. His fingers tapped anxiously against his knee, his eyes darting around the train compartment. Brian, on the other hand, was used to traveling alone. He could tell that Luke needed someone to talk to. First time going to Aspen Hills. No, I actually study there at Maple Grove Academy, just not used to traveling alone, Luke replied. And you? Oh, well, it's hard to say. Even I am unsure of what awaits me at Aspen Hills, Brian said with a smirk. Interesting, used to. Before Luke could finish, they were interrupted by two men seated nearby. The two men approached the boys. One of them was holding a winning scratch card with a prize of $1,000. They told the boys how they had both gone to purchase a scratch card at a convenience store, but it was the last one left. Since neither wanted to miss out, they split the cost and agreed to share winnings. Now we've won, but we have a problem. One of them explained, only one person can cash it in, and the prize is too big for us to just hand over to the other. I only have $150 on me, which isn't enough to pay this guy his half of the prize, said the other man. They proceeded to strike a deal with the boys. Prize amount is $1,000, but after taxes, we'll take home around $750. If you have $750 on you, you can buy the scratch card from us, so we can split the winnings and you can cash it in all. Luke was skeptical. Brian, however, seemed like he wanted to help. I might not have the full amount. I only had $600 on me. $600? One of the men muttered. Well, we really need this settled, so let's say the difference of $150 can be your cut for helping us out. Luke didn't like this one bit. He slyly kicked Brian's foot under the table to warn him that this was a scam. Brian ignored the nudges and went to heavy exchange. He counted his money and handed it over, receiving the scratch card in return. The two men, satisfied, split the cash, stuffed it into their bags, and returned to their seats a few rows down. Luke shook his head in disappointment and whispered, "Are you nuts? Do you even know if that ticket is real? Why would you give them all your money?" Brian smirked. "Oh, you think the scratch card is fake." He crumpled it in his hand and tossed it aside. Luke was speechless before he could say anything. Brian excused himself to use the washroom, chuckling to himself as he walked away. Luke sat there, baffled, wondering how someone his age could weigh his money and still be so calm about it. As he was returning, Brian suddenly tripped and fell. The two men from earlier, seated nearby, quickly moved to help him up. "Thank you." "No worries, boy, least we can do," one of them muttered. Brian returned to his seat, smelling Luke. Luke was still in disbelief. "Are you rich or just foolish?" "I am no fool, and I am certainly not rich," Brian replied, unzipping his fanny pack. "Look." Luke leaned in, eyes widening as Brian revealed. Not only did he have his money back, but also the rest of the scammer's money. "But how did you?" Brian grinned. A magician never reveals his secrets. Luke exhaled in disbelief. "You sure are an interesting one." "No doubt about that." Luke smirked. "I wish you were in my school. There are these two beautiful girls, creme to the creme of our class. Half the boys at my school don't have the courage to approach them, and the other half make complete fools of themselves." Brian raised an eyebrow. "Is that so?" "Yeah, but I'm sure if you went to my school, you'd steal one, if not both their hearts." Luke laughed to him. Brian was the coolest kid his age that ever met. As the train pulled into the station, Luke and Brian deported. "Will I ever see you again? It'd be a shame if I didn't." Brian shrugged. "Maybe, if the universe allows it." I guess Luke grinned, shaking his head. "You really are something, Brian. I hope your adventure out to be as fun as you are." They exchanged a final nod before Luke headed off to grab a cab. Brian hailed one too and made his way to Hart Towers. When he arrived, Brian was absolutely stunned. The towering skyscrapers and sleek modern architecture stood before him like something out of a sci-fi comic book. The luxury and grandeur were almost unreal, and for a brief moment, Brian wondered if he'd somehow stepped into a different world altogether. Unsure of how to get to Mr. Hart's office, he approached two security guards standing by the entrance. "Excuse me, which way is Mr. Hart's office?" "Main." Security guard raised an eyebrow, sizing Brian up. "Mr. Hart, you mean the Robert Hart, the chairman of this entire empire?" Brian nodded a little more confidently. "Now, yeah, he invited me here on special business." Both guards let out a short laugh. "Maybe he's here to beg for leftovers. Look at him, ragged hoodie, cheap sneakers. Looks like he hasn't had a proper meal in days," said the other guard mockingly, and he says, "Mr. Hart invited him. What did you find that invite in a dumpster?" The guards continued their mocking laughter. Brian, frustrated, was about to say something when suddenly a voice from behind called out, "Brian." Brian Woods. The guards turned, surprised. It was Albert Bennett, the Hart family butler. Albert was almost family to the Harts. In Robert's absence, he'd often even leave Albert in charge of his decision-making. Let him in. "You goons," Mr. Hart invited him personally. The guards stepped aside, looking at each other, still puzzled. What could a billionaire want with this kid? Albert smiled apologetically as he approached Brian. "I'm terribly sorry about that, Brian. I was just about to head out to pick you up." "No need to apologize. I made it here just fine," Brian replied with a happy grin, "still processing everything that you did. Let me take your bags. Mr. Hart's office is just this way." As they walked down the corridor, Brian couldn't help but feel his heart race. This was it. He was about to meet someone who could change his life forever. When they arrived at Mr. Hart's office, Brian was almost starstruck. The office itself looked more like a boardroom from a high-budget movie. The luxury, sleek lines, the massive windows showing a breathtaking view of the city. It all seemed unreal. Meeting Mr. Hart's for the first time, Brian instinctively bowed as soon as he saw him, remembering what Mr. Lin had taught. Mr. Hart seemed a little caught off guard as he moved forward. He said, "That's a nice pendant." Brian felt a little weird as he was not expecting those to be his first words. Mr. Hart then gently raised Brian from his bowl with a polite smile. "We don't really do that here," he said, offering Brian a handshake. Brian took the handshake, a little embarrassed but still focused. "So what kind of work do you usually do, Brian?" Mr. Hart asked, clearly sizing him up for the first time. Brian hesitated before explaining. He described the odd jobs Mr. Lin would give him, like making slippers out of straw that sold for $2, and occasionally the missions Mr. Lin would send him on. In a moment of honesty, Brian blurted out, "It doesn't pay much." Mr. Hart smiled warmly, leaning back in his chair. "Well, don't worry about that anymore. Your monthly salary will be $30,000, and will cover your school fees as well. You'll be living in my daughter's villa, and any money you spend on her will be reimbursed." Brian's eyes widened. "Wait, school fees, daughter. Did Mr. Lin not tell you what your mission was?" Mr. Hart interrupted, raising an eyebrow. "Number? He said you would tell." "Me." Mr. Hart chuckled, shaking his head. "Ah, that funny old man. You're going to be my daughter's secret bodyguard, keeping her out of harm's way at any cost." Brian blinked, still processing. "Oh, you'll live in her guest room and attend the same school as her." Mr. Hart continued, "But no one can know you're there to protect her. You'll just be her study buddy." "Got it. Got it," Brian said, his excitement bubbling up despite his confusion. "I don't know how to thank you for this opportunity, sir." Mr. Hart's smile grew a little more serious. Brian couldn't shake the feeling. Was the mission really this simple by keeping my daughter safe? I'm afraid she's in a lot of danger. He stood up, signaling the end of the conversation. Albert will take you to her school and introduce you. Good luck, Brian. I hope what Mr. Lin says about you is true. As Mr. Hart rushed off to a conference room, Albert guided Brian out toward the car. As they drove, Albert leaned in slightly. Miss Stella isn't exactly easy to get along with. She can be difficult, especially with new people. But Brian was too overjoyed to take the warning seriously. I'm sure I can handle it. How hard can it be? His jade pendant tucked beneath his shirt emitted a faint glow, but Brian didn't notice. He was too wrapped up in the idea of his new adventure. He never had the chance at a formal education before. The mere thought of attending school was very exciting for Brian. He was given a chance to attend the same school as a billionaire's daughter. Brian was blinded by joy, full of hope and confidence. He had no idea what he had signed up for.